see Jim Harbaugh, man of his word, got a 15-0 tattoo on his right arm.
Oh, he wanted to get something the NCAA couldn't take away. So,
well, if anyone knows about tattoos, it would be Ohio State.
It would be Ohio State, absolutely.
It's the spring game episode of the Rivalry Podcast. I'm Jace. That's JP. It's Michigan, Ohio State, your garbage-free college football podcast. On social media at Rival Pod. Lots of fun stuff up on Twitter and Instagram, by the way.
It feels good to be back.
The Michigan spring game, so be sure to check that out there. I know. I was telling my wife before the spring game, because we were up in Ann Arbor this past weekend. Like, I don't feel ready for football. And then
can't relate.
And then
I wish it never ended.
About 20 minutes into the spring game warm up, I was like, oh yeah, we're back, we're ready.
And I know it was Ann Arbor, and I never enjoy going to that place.
Well,
but being able to go and like walk down the tunnel, and I'm seeing players in full pads warming up and like going through the motions. You hear the crowd, you see them kind of starting to pile in. Just the energy of being in a stadium.
Oh yeah,
just brings me back. So I started thinking about all the stuff we were able to experience last season, all the stuff we're hopeful for this season. And it's just going to be phenomenal. I have been ready. The second football season's done. I'm like, all right, next week we've got to figure out something. I guess the USFL, whatever.
Have you watched any of that?
I sure have.
Is it any good?
It's not, but it's football, so it'll get by. Whatever league The Rock is now owning.
You're used to watching Rutgers, though. So
hey,
I mean,
don't you disrespect my Knights this early on. We play Howard game 1, so.
Howard, do you think that's going to go?
No, you're done.
Nope.
You're not.
I've got
one
more.
of us is not in mid-season form.
I mean, so let's start off with Michigan, just because they had their spring game just this past weekend. Again, we were able to be up there. Instagram, Twitter, we've got some fun stuff there at Rival Pod. Be sure to check that out. Michigan comes in with quite a number of questions, I think, on the team at large, particularly on the offensive side of the ball. Obviously, months old story, but in case you've been living under a rock, Sharon Moore, now the head coach of Michigan, lots of staff turnover and transition there for the Wolverines too.
Can I say one thing? And it's not.
It's a podcast. So you can say multiple things.
It's not going to be. It's going to sound like it's a dig, but it's not.
This is called the rivalry. So, it can be a dig. You don't have to apologize for it.
I'm just genuinely curious. So you guys are coming off a national championship season. You beat your rival for the third year in a row. You're Big Ten championships for 3 years in a row. And now this is the first season where there are a lot of questions. And so you go into this game, and it's free, by the way, which I at least didn't know until we got there.
Ohio State charged what, like $10?
Something. It was a small price, to get in there. Whatever. But it was a free event. And there were, I think the final number was 30,100 something people that attended this game. I will give you some credit. It was a little chilly, but it wasn't what I would say bad football weather. It was a little cold, but if you had a jacket, you're fine. I was a little bit surprised at how 30,000 is still a decent crowd, but coming off of all of those accolades, as a fan, these are the moments that I'm more curious, where I want to be there in person to see it, because I want to say, I almost want to see the answer to the question myself. So I want to go see how Sharon Moore coaches. I want to go see Alex Orji and Davis Warren. I want to see if Donovan Edwards looks like himself. I want to see these things in person. And I know that it was broadcast on Fox and all that, but it just felt like for a free game, the attendance disappointed me. And I'm curious, as a Michigan fan, how you view that, because Ohio State, and I'm not trying to compare them, but Ohio State charges $10 and pulls in 80,000 people into their stands. And when you're coming off all of these accolades, and you would think the excitement in Ann Arbor would be through the roof, and you have 30,000 people, just kind of surprised me.
Yeah, I don't care.
I figured.
We've already played relevant football in 2024, so what's it matter?
I'm just thinking, and you can say that, but to me, that's just, as a fan, I would be disappointed. I think if it was an Ohio State thing.
No Michigan fan cares. The only people that care are Ohio State fans. I promise you.
The nation cares. It was a big deal.
The nation doesn't care. Nobody,
I think so.
No Michigan fan and no part of that program gives a what
All I'm saying
about Ohio State touting spring game numbers.
If the role was reversed, Michigan fans would be saying the same thing. And
it'd
like
be
I said,
dumb.
And like I said, I'm not trying to make it a dig. I'm just genuinely curious from a fan perspective. If it was Ohio State and they pulled in 30,000 and it was a free event, I'm going, you guys don't want to go see Julian Sayin, Jeremiah Smith. You don't want to see James People. You don't want to see these young guys. You don't want to see Will Howard, any of that. Like, to me as a fan, any chance that I get to go and see my team where I'm able to go and watch them play, all day.
Sure. No, and I've got no, like, you know, if I'm, especially if I were in Ann Arbor or roles reversed in a alternate universe where I'm in a living Tech and I'm an Ohio State fan. Yeah, of course you want to go see your team play. I get that. Nobody in that program, nobody in the fan base, the only people that seem to care about spring game numbers are Ohio State. So when we hang your,
but it's not about
when we hang your spring recruiting championship banner, and when we hand out national championships for spring game attendance,
it is not about caring about the attendance.
You worry about having 80,000 people at your spring game. Michigan is over getting national championship rings.
It's not about caring about the number of people in the stands. It's about not caring about the game itself, is my point. Like, I know it's the spring game, so you take it with a grain of salt.
It's an open practice.
All I'm saying is a true fan would have been in that stadium cheering on their Michigan Wolverines, and they just weren't there.
Hang the banner, bud. Michigan did get their rings on Saturday morning, which was fun because we actually got to see down the sideline tons of players down there. I know we saw Chris Jenkins, Blake Corum up close. I know McCarthy was there. Michael Barrett was there as well, which that's fun. That's fun to see those guys. Obviously, back for the ring ceremony for the spring game as well. And then for a lot of these guys, obviously the NFL draft coming up on Thursday in Detroit. So it makes a lot of sense that they're there. Jim Harbaugh, by the way, I did not see him at the game. I don't know. I assume he was there, but you see Jim Harbaugh, man of his word, got a 15-0 tattoo on his right arm.
Oh, he wanted to get something the NCAA couldn't take away. So,
well, if anyone knows about tattoos, it would be Ohio State.
It would be Ohio State, absolutely. But we could have recommended a great artist.
I love the fact, though, that Jim promised the team he'd do this, gets it, and someone did ask, where are you going to get it? And he said, on my right arm, because that's my throwing arm. And they said, well, Coach, does this hurt? And he says, I'm impervious to pain.
He's an idiot.
And I love that man so much.
Did you see the actual close-up of the tattoo?
It's honestly not great.
It ain't great.
It isn't.
Low-key, someone pointed this out. It looks like the Maryland logo, which is just hysterical.
If Jim Harbaugh's going to get a tattoo, that's exactly the type of tattoo I'd expect.
100% fits him. It is very bland.
A simple 15-0.
It is bland.
No decor. It's
nothing fancy.
Font.
Not even colored. Didn't even get it colored.
I love every bit of that. All right, let's talk actual football, not just tout spring game attendance numbers. The biggest thing for me that I want to see, the obvious question for Michigan is quarterback battle, right?
Yeah.
I was pretty pleased with what I saw. I don't know that anything shocked me.
Yeah.
Watching, I can tell you, Jaden Denegal did not have a good day. Jaden Davis had, I'm sorry, not Jaden Denegal, but Denegal did not have a good day.
He did not have a good day.
Jaden Davis looked fine. He threw, I think, 4 passes. They're not going to use him a ton anyway. But he did have one that
I was impressed with. It was on the run. It was on the right side of the field. Threw it about 20, 30 yards. The big question that
everybody wanted to see what is Alex Orji going to look like? And I think you can leave going both, that doesn't really tell you much because, again, this is spring practice, right? This is an open practice that everybody gets to go watch.
Yeah.
There were a couple bad balls that he threw, especially early on. Seemed like he needed to settle in a little bit, which, again, makes sense. It's spring practice.
Yeah.
But he also had, I think he ended up going 13 of 18, so fairly accurate there. He had a nice touchdown run as well. And I saw a couple folks on the Michigan beat mention, you can see why he's got appeal.
Yeah. For sure.
I mean, you were down there as a photographer. I mean, you got to see him up close. That's a big dude.
That
is a massive dude.
I knew he was on the team. Obviously wasn't ignorant to that, but I never paid attention to him because all the games we went to last year, it was JJ McCarthy's where my eyes were at. And so I actually got to see him behind center during warmups. And this dude walks by and he's just a tank. I mean, you look at the other quarterbacks, you look at 20th year Jack Tuttle or Jake Tuttle, whatever. I don't even need to learn his name at this point. You look at a guy like that next to Alex Orji and you go, now I get it.
Yeah. Yeah. Which, the concern I think for Michigan fans is besides the fact that you have to you have to acknowledge you are not going to replace J.J. McCarthy.
Yeah.
It's the same type of thing that you guys went through as Ohio State fans with C.J. Stroud of going, we know Kyle McCord, and again, that was still a question of who it was going to be, but you get the point. We know Kyle McCord's not going to be C.J. Stroud. We don't need him to be. We just need him to be the best version of Kyle McCord, which you did not get. Same thing for Michigan right now, where you don't need another J.J. McCarthy. Jaden Davis is going to be that guy, but it's not going to be this year. You would hope
that's where
he's on the path. He looks like he's going to be.
He showed flashes of it,
but that's not going to be this year in all likelihood. But so I'm pleased with Alex Orji. There's still a lot of time. I did think it was interesting that Kirk Campbell afterwards said that going after quarterback in the portal, like he said, we're always evaluating the roster, but that's not really our top priority right now.
Said it's not really part of the plan.
Not saying, hey, I'm not going to rule it out, but basically their main focus is on getting some wide receivers out of the portal. That's
a necessity.
That's their first and foremost, which we'll touch on in a second. But yeah, I thought Alex Orji looked good, and I think he's probably, in most people's mind, likely to be the starter.
Yeah.
Davis Warren had a really nice spring game. So that is what will make this interesting going into fall camp. You mentioned Jack Tuttle. Tuttle, I see, and I'm not the first. We're not the first people to make this comparison, but Tuttle feels like it could be a Cade McNamara type situation where you've got a guy that's got seniority, he's got a good arm, he's accurate, and it's more game manager, take care of the football type thing. We
didn't get to see him at all,
right? So it'll be curious to see what that looks like. Do you go with him? There's a guy next to me talking about this. Do you go with him and then insert Alex Orji more often, but in some of those run packages like we saw last season?
Yeah.
Because when he was inserted for that, despite the fact that we all knew it was coming, he was pretty effective at that. Yeah, I called that for Ohio State, for Devin Brown, I called that the Tate Martell package, except Devin Brown wasn't very good at it.
And still isn't.
And so that's a threat though for Alex Orji, especially if he can dial in some of his passes. If he can protect the football by just making smart plays, safe throws, and then you add in the threat of that big body running through people, now you've got yourself a quarterback system.
To me, it's the
exact same thing. We've got 4 or 5 months before we have to worry about that.
Yeah, to me, it's very similar to what Ohio State had going on last year, where you look at Davis Warren, and my takeaway from the spring game was, well, that's the best passer you guys have on the team. I mean,
at least from who played.
At least from who played. I mean, who knows with Tuttle, whatever. He wasn't dressed, obviously. Yeah. But you see the appeal, like you said, with Alex Orji, where I look at that and I see, okay, the speed, the mobility, all of that can cause an issue for a defense. His passing isn't atrocious.
No.
But it's not great.
It definitely needs some fine-tuning.
You clearly see the flaw in his game. Yep. But you also see the appeal where you go, okay, but he's more mobile and he can help make plays on the ground, when right now we don't really have a lot of playmakers. Yeah.
And also it's over. I don't think you can overstate. It's also mid-April.
Yeah. And so we'll touch on this a little bit later as well.
He was a second or third stringer like 3 months ago.
But going in as an Ohio State fan into enemy territory, the stuff I'm looking at in this game is probably very similar to what you are. I want to see what Donovan Edwards looked like.
Which Donovan Edwards is still on one.
Well, you had,
oh my goodness.
You had the 1 year where he was just a stud. After Corum went down, he stepped in, and you thought, this guy is going to be running back one. He is going to be the future. Like, it's going to be amazing. And then last year, he slid off for literally 99% of the year until the time where it really mattered. And I wouldn't even say that he was like he wasn't back to what he was doing, but you saw the old Donovan start to return.
Well, the Washington game, he looked like his old self.
Yes, and that's the Donovan Edwards that you needed, that you're going to have to rely on heavy this year.
And again, and so despite the fact that it was a practice, like he still had that juice going.
And that's what I was going to say. Is, as an Ohio State fan, I'm going to see, okay, is Donovan Edwards back to his old ways, or was last year the real Donovan Edwards? And I thought he showed the explosiveness that he had before. I wanted to see their quarterback play, which I still think I didn't walk away learning anything. I think going in, I knew Alex Orji was not going to be a great passer. He was going to be used more in the run game. I knew Davis Warren was the true passer of the team. I was more excited to see Jaden Davis just because I wanted to see the future, because it's very similar to what I viewed McCarthy when he started. I know whoever you're throwing at quarterback, the eyes are on this kid.
Yeah.
This is the highly recruited
This is the guy that's going to have the reins for 3 years.
That I should be thinking about in the future. And I walked away from him thinking, I see it. I see it. He's not there. And I still wouldn't say that I'm like, I walked away overly impressed. He did have the one throw on the run. That was a 20, 30-yard pass. It was a phenomenal catch. Just a great ball. It was really nice. But he just didn't play enough for me to get like a great viewpoint. Other than that, I mean, it was basically what I expected. You wanted to kind of see how the offensive line, after they left, they lost a bunch of people there.
I think offensive line is going to be good again. It's not going to be at the same level, but Michigan has recruited really well.
I liked the way that Michigan did this, and I even gave him credit after the game. I know, like when Ohio State, and we'll get to this obviously, when most teams, when they do their scrimmages, their spring games, it's you start off with your ones versus your ones. You take them out after a little bit. But Michigan, I mean, they were going in and they did what you said is like a draft style. So who you had with Alex Orji wasn't necessarily all of the ones. It was a bunch of players kind of mixed in and out. And I really actually enjoyed that. I felt like it made it a little bit more competitive and fun to watch.
Yeah.
You still had your main guys. I mean, you still had Alex Orji with Donovan Edwards to help them kind of get their rhythm together.
David Warren had Kalel Mullings.
The stuff where it made sense, you still had those, but all the other positions were kind of intertwined. And I really enjoyed that they were able to do that. I thought that was a cool little touch.
And also, like, let's also be real. Like, the two-hand touch thing that Ohio State did at their spring practice is ridiculous.
Everybody does that for the most part.
Do they?
For the most part.
For a really tough team.
Look,
two-hand touches
somebody that
is
spent
pretty
the first
soft.
15 minutes of this podcast saying nobody gives a crap about spring games, you sure care a lot about
interesting. Now we don't care so much about what's going on in Columbus. Okay.
I didn't say that at all.
The other big question for Michigan, because quarterback is the obvious one. The defense looks really good. The defense is going to continue to be really good. They've got a lot of good guys returning. They've got some great recruits coming in. The other big question for Michigan is going to be wide receiver. And I will say that I am not as I'm not as doom and gloom as some of the fan base, I think, on this. Now, I fully agree with Campbell and Frederick Moore and all that stuff that you've got to go into the portal and get some receivers. There are 5 scholarship wide receivers on that team.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think the guys they have are pretty good.
There were some heck of a couple of catches that
Samaj Morgan, we've already seen, we've already seen the flashes from him in the return game and in the
but there's not a clear wide receiver one.
Frederick Moore, also very good. Tyler Morris, like those are the 3 guys. Okay?
Mm-hmm. I mean, right
Morgan,
now,
Moore, and Morris are the 3 guys.
Your biggest threat in the passing game is your tight end.
Well, Colston Loveland. And also, by the way, don't sleep on Max Bredesen. Holy cow. That's a big dude too. So like, I'm not as doom and gloom, but the question there becomes depth. Mm-hmm. Excuse me. What happens if Samaj Morgan goes down? What happens if Tyler Morris gets hurt? What happens if Colston Loveland tweaks an ankle or something? You've got a couple guys that can step in, but not a ton, and as good of a spring game as guys like Kendrick Bell had. Kendrick Bell is not a guy you want out there as a wide receiver 2 every snap. He might get there, but he's not there yet. Mm-hmm. So you've got to go after the kid from UCLA. You've got to see who else comes in during the spring portal window. Okay. It's open until the end of the month. So there will be some moves, one would hope, from the Michigan side between now and the end of April to see what comes in. And then you'll pick it back up and you'll go from there when you get into fall ball as well. That's most of what I have on the Michigan side of things. I think you nailed it ultimately. You're not going to learn a ton from these spring games. It really, more than anything else, and you hit on this, it's a fun chance to go out, to go see your team,
to see the young guys,
see what's happening,
to see the future.
You get to go take in college football.
Yeah, you get a little.
That's what this is.
A little juice,
and then we get to sit here and overanalyze everything and go. Every single pass. The first pass from Orji that misses, you can see everybody kind of lean in and go, "Well, we're not going to beat Ohio State that way." It's like, what? Settle down, but also this is what we do as a fan base. It's incredible.
I'm not going to beat Ohio State anyways, but
what you got on the Buckeye side of things besides an attendance record?
I was excited. I think the one thing going into this, I mean, there's the obvious questions with a new quarterback after McCord transfers out. I wanted to see Will Howard, even though in my mind he's the clear QB1. It's not like last year where we were trying to be spoon-fed that Devin Brown was somehow a college quarterback. If I have to hear another person tell me that, I'm going to just vomit everywhere. Devin Brown has never played a football game in a scarlet and gray uniform where I have walked away and thought, I see it. I can see what you're talking about. But
I see the potential there.
But if you get on Twitter,
which I highly recommend at Rifle Pod.
Sweet Lord, it is like he is the GOAT quarterback of all times. I feel like every spring I hear the same story that Devin Brown is showing flashes. He's really impressed in the practice. And then he gets in the game and I'm like, but has he? I don't.
Because that was Ryan's big thing last year was, well, in practice though, he's looking good.
And I feel the same way, and I feel the same way this year with Julian Sayin, where the transfer from Alabama, all I heard all offseason was Julian Sayin's really been, throwing some dots around. He's got some great chemistry. He was a 5-star recruit going to Alabama, transferred out after 1 year. There's a lot of promise, and I'm not going to rip on the kid and say he's going to be terrible forever, but I was not impressed with him whatsoever. His decision-making was bad.
Are you saying that it might have been overrated?
I am saying that he is not there yet. I'm not giving up. I view him very similar to Jaden Davis from Michigan. You saw throws where you were like, I can start to see what you're talking about, but overall I just wasn't impressed. He had one interception. He went 10 of 17, 85 yards, but he had a couple of times where I'm like, that decision making is just.
I think the quarterbacks, and again, this is overanalyzing a spring practice.
Yeah,
but that's what we're here for. The quarterbacks threw 4 interceptions, and some of them were butt ugly.
And there were some of them, and I think obviously a lot of Buckeye fans were going into this game hyper focused on that.
Sure.
And Will Howard got the start. I thought he was great. Like he did what he was supposed to do. He threw 8 of his first 9 were completions. They got to the red zone, and we talked about this driving up to Michigan. He had 3 incompletions in the red zone, and people are overreacting and all this other stuff.
They're going to try to throw the ball in the end zone because they want to just see what you can do.
Because they just want to see what you can do. Yeah. These are not the same play calls you're going to get in a game situation.
Well, it's Ryan Day, so you never know.
I do want to touch on something.
Okay, we'll get there.
I do want to touch on that a little bit. So I walked away feeling confident Will Howard, to me, had the clear separation as QB1.
Let me ask this on Howard, though. I think we both agree that this is a Kyle McCord upgrade, but it still feels very Kyle McCord-esque, doesn't it?
I don't think so.
He seems fine. I don't think that.
I thought
the second coming of CJ Stroud is the way it was talked about on, again, the vile snake pit of Twitter is the way it was talked about when he transferred in. Like, we got our guy. No, that's the only guy that would come to you. That's how that works.
I don't know if that's true. I think
got your guy would have been Dylan Gabriel or Cam Ward or Dante Moore.
Dylan Gabriel was never coming to anywhere except Oregon, and everybody knows.
But those other guys would have been the guy.
Well, and
Will Howard was. I guess we're left with you.
Cam Ward would have been a cool guy to see in a Buckeye uniform. Dante Moore, you just don't know where you're getting with him. So sure, they were the flashier names, but Will Howard is a leader, a veteran guy. He's been in college for probably about the same time as
Jack
Tuttle. And so he's been around the program.
Jack Tuttle versus Will Howard death match.
It's what everybody wants to see. But to me, you're bringing in a better Kyle McCord, which rip on Kyle McCord all you want. I think the only real flaw of his game was his lack of leadership. I thought statistically and his decision-making. I think
two fairly important things for the quarterback.
Well, and this isn't me defending Kyle McCord. This isn't me defending Kyle McCord because I think those are massive flaws. But he still was like second in the Big Ten in most every statistical category.
He was fine.
He was still pretty dang good. He was
firmly fine.
And so I think Will Howard can put up those same stats. He adds some mobility behind center that nobody on our team really had, which will help. And I think he's going to be more mature. He's going to be a better decision maker. He's going to be the one thing that we talked about driving up to Michigan. And we had this pretty lengthy discussion. I don't think Kyle McCord was ever the vocal leader that a quarterback needed to be.
Agree.
And I don't know. You can pin some of that on coaching, but sometimes the quarterback, that guy just doesn't have it.
Yeah.
And I think Will Howard has that ability. I've not seen him enough to know if he already has it.
Yeah.
But I trust him as a captain that I feel like he at least can develop it if he doesn't already own it. I think when he gets into the huddle, to me, and that's one thing that I'll give J.J. McCarthy a ton of credit on, the second he went under center and he got in the huddle, everybody in maize and blue was listening. They were tuned in and locked into what that guy was saying. I never saw that on the sidelines. Yeah. I never saw that in the huddle at any time with Kyle McCord. So I'm I'm fairly confident Will Howard's going to be able to bring that to the table. And if you add that mixed in with a better statistical in almost every category than what Kyle McCord could throw out, I feel confident going forward. I don't think Kyle McCord lost us games last year. I think Ryan Day did. I mean, if you go back and view our Michigan episode, I thought Kyle McCord did what he needed to do. I thought the offensive line failed him, and I thought Ryan Day's lack of any sort of aggression killed that game.
I think it'll be interesting to see. And again, this is less about what did we see from spring game and more looking ahead. Well, I take that back because we did talk about this too. Like the offensive line was this is low hanging fruit. The offensive line was a major struggle point for Ohio State last year. Nowhere was maybe that more significant thing in the Missouri game, right? The hope, I think, from Ohio State fans, and correct me if I'm wrong here, was that, yes, it's going to be a spring game, but you want to at least see, have we moved in any sort of direction with getting guys like Seth McLaughlin? Have we moved any sort of way in the right direction between January and April? And the answer was no.
Yeah.
I did not.
Slightly better, but
the bit that I watched from Ohio State, I watched a little chunk of it, and again, I thought Will Howard was fine. I wasn't overly impressed with him, but it's a spring game. But offensive line continued to just look like a trouble spot. And that's where, as good as a running back duo as Henderson and Judkins are going to be, because I do think they'll be a good running back, both good
best
running
running
backs.
back duo in the Big Ten.
I don't know about that.
Who's better?
And here's why. Because so much of your run game and really so much of your offense relies on your offensive line. If you can't protect your quarterback, you can't throw the ball. If you can't create lanes, you can't run the ball. And I'm not convinced Ohio State has done enough on the offensive line. And again, we're looking at everything with eyes on November, right? Can Ohio State's offensive line hang with a really good Michigan defensive line? Guys like Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant. And I'm blanking on the name of the kid that's transferring in from Maryland. Michigan's got a really solid defense. I don't know that Ohio State's offensive line can hold up on that. Now, there's still time to get guys in the portal. There's time for guys to gel. But that would be a concern for me if I were a Buckeye fan.
And I think part of it, I mean, it's tough to
look. Is that fair or is that being a homer?
A mix of both. I think
it's fair.
I think to me, the O-line is still the biggest question. I'll agree with you on that. But I don't think it's abysmal. I don't think it's the worst thing I've ever seen. I think McLaughlin being added did improve it a slight little bit. But you have to look at the spring game. Ohio State's defensive line is full of first-round picks,
and that's fair. That's fair.
So you're looking at them going up against guys that are going to go first, second, at absolute latest, late second-round picks, just littered across that line with talent.
Yeah,
and so you look at that and you go, well, they're getting beat by like JT and Jack Sawyer and Tyleik Williams and all these guys. But then to your point, when you get to a national championship game, when you get to the playoffs, those are the guys you're going to be facing against.
Yeah.
And so,
Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham are coming at you. Makari Page is blitzing. You've got to be able to hold up against that.
So to your point, yes, but also they've got a whole season to work and gel together.
Correct.
And so it's tough to say this early on because you look at the spring game and you go, oh man, they do not look good. And then you go, but also
spring game.
Ohio State's defense was a top defense last year, and they're returning almost every single person.
Yeah,
and they added a bunch more talent on that side of the ball.
I don't think there's any doubt in my mind that Ohio State's defense is going to be really good again. I don't know that the offense is really taken much of a step forward for me.
But I think if it stays the same, and you just
see, I don't know that the offense staying the same is enough to get the job done.
If the offense stays the same, I won't even say stays the same. If you fix the mental errors that McCord had last year, if Will Howard can come in and he cannot, I mean, there were numerous games last year. I think we talked on the road about Penn State last year at Ohio State. There was the one play where McCord and it happened numerous times in Notre Dame as well, where he was getting pressured and he just kind of said, screw it, Marv's down there somewhere. And he just literally launched it in the air, almost underhand throw.
Yeah.
And with Penn State, it was a fumble. They picked it up and returned it. There was a holding call
which was absolutely
an absolute right call.
But also Kyle didn't see that for a second.
Not at all. But that changes the game entirely. If you can get rid of those mental errors, I'm not saying Will Howard needs to come in and play perfect football.
No.
But you can't have those mistakes, and you need to have a vocal leader.
Yeah.
If you can fix that, even with the loss of Marvin Harrison Jr., which is an insane loss, they still have a ton of talent on that side of the ball with Ibuka returning. You have Jeremiah Smith, who it's still practice. You still read the Twitter headlines and all that stuff, are making it out to be like this guy is going to be a starter day one. And I do believe that. I don't think he's coming out freshman year and having 1,000 yards and whatever. He could. He absolutely could. But I think you're going to have a dynamic offense. You just need to have a guy behind center that is a veteran leader that's not going to make those rookie mistakes. And if you have that on top of the defense that you already have, plus I think a thing that really hurt Ohio State last year was their run game, because Henderson, when he was healthy, showed his explosiveness. He had very, very good games when he was healthy. The second he went down, Chip Trayanum was not getting the job done for me. Mayan Williams was not getting the job done for me. He was not the Mayan Williams we saw the first time that Travion went down. Dallin Hayden, for some reason, Ryan Day just refused to give this man playing time, which is an entire another thing that I could go off of. But now you're going into this season. Mayan graduated. He's going to the NFL draft, probably as an undrafted free agent, if I had to guess. Dallin Hayden is in the transfer portal, which might be, we've talked in, I don't even think on an episode, but we've talked about what transfer guy has hurt the most for Ohio State. Dallin Hayden for me, and it's not even close. And so you go, I would put that over the Kyle McCord thing, even had we not gotten Will Howard. So you look at that. Dallin Hayden's not there. Mayan Williams isn't there. Chip Trayanum transferred out. So now
he's at Kentucky.
He went to Kentucky. Dallin Hayden is not committed, although I saw that he was going on a visit to Colorado with Coach Prime. Whatever. I genuinely hope Dallin Hayden balls out wherever he goes, as long as it's not maize and blue. But you look at this running back room now, and they bring in a guy like Judkins. And I go, I am not confident in Travion Henderson's ability to stay healthy for an entire year. And if we didn't get Judkins and he goes down, now you're looking at freshman running back James Peoples. You're looking at freshman running back Pickerington North graduate, actually, around this area, Sam Williams-Dixon. Who will both be fine running backs, but are not ready for that. Yeah, 100%. I think Sam Williams-Dixon, and I talked to you when he first committed, because he is originally from West Holmes, the Millersburg area, which played.
Are we going to have to do this thing again this season where we talk about random places in Ohio no one knows?
He's my new Cade Stover, the West Holm Knights.
Awesome, great.
He came out. He had 11 carries, 75 yards, and a 22-yard touchdown. He looked really good. He looked like this is a guy you can look forward to in the future, just not right now. But you look at that running back room, and had Judkins not transferred in, and let's say Henderson goes down, you're relying on two true freshmen to come in and carry the load. That's a huge question. So now, if Henderson does go down, you have a guy that is fully capable of coming in and providing. Now, hopefully we don't have to go down that road.
You do, and what that does is it does help you, if Travion stays healthy, is it does help you, similar to the way that Corum and Edwards were used, where it keeps some tread off the tires, it keeps guys fresh. But so much of, and again, this is obviously not to take anything away from Corum and Edwards, so don't hear that at all. But the offensive line for Michigan has been so dang good that, I mean, obviously that helps those guys out.
Oh, for sure.
So I remain unconvinced that Ohio State's offense is better now than they were last year.
It's the same thing.
Because, I mean, here's the thing that they've had for years. Even when they had CJ Stroud, you had CJ Stroud and Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, like you had all these guys, and it didn't matter. So now we get to this year, and Will Howard is, even if he's fine, even if he's a good quarterback, I'm not convinced that moving from Kyle McCord with Marv and Ibuka and Stover, I'm not convinced you've moved forward by having Will Howard with Ibuka and Jeremiah Smith. I don't think that you're there.
Yeah, the only thing
the offensive line is a question mark. I don't believe that they've taken the steps forward. I don't think the offense is better off today than they were last year.
But I don't know if I think they're significantly worse. I think it's.
I'm not saying they're worse. I'm just saying I don't think they've. I think that this looks to me a lot like the team you had last year.
But I think last year's team with a smarter quarterback can get you there.
The lights get too bright for Ryan. You know this. The lights get too bright for Ryan Day.
That isn't a different argument because, and I said I wanted to touch on this because
let's hit it.
There are 2 points in that game, and this kind of goes in. There was like the way that Fox was doing things was cool, but also terrible.
I think Joel Klatt should be interviewing Ryan Day throughout the entire Michigan game.
It is cool to kind of get that. It's cool to get that on the field kind of point of view stuff.
I like it.
But there were times where I'm like, I don't love this. But there were 2 points that I really did think were humorous. And even as an Ohio State fan, I thought, Ryan, just shut your mouth, man. Shut your mouth. And I want to say, and I'm going to forget, I might get this wrong. I don't remember who was playing quarterback, who was running, whatever. But Ohio State was in the red zone. And I want to say that it was Devin Brown, but it might have been Will Howard who actually handed it off. But it was supposed to be a run-pass option. And while they're leading up to it, he goes to hike it. And Ryan Day goes, throw it. And then I forget what quarterback it was, handed it off. The running back scurried in for a touchdown and scored. And Ryan goes, I would have thrown it, but. And I thought, Ryan, why would you even talk, man? Because you scored a touchdown. Why would you not just say,
I'm surprised he would have punted from there.
Well, and to go further into that, later on down the road, it's 3rd down and whatever. And Ryan Day starts sending out his field goal unit. And everybody on the Fox newscast is like, Joel, let him know it's not 4th down. It's only 3rd down. And so they go down and Joel goes up to Ryan Day live on TV and goes, hey, Ryan, it's not 4th down. It's only 3rd down. And he goes, we're going to kick it. We're going to kick it anyways. And I thought, this man did not know
what down it was.
He absolutely did not know. And it was so evident. And you could tell that he was embarrassed. And I thought, Ryan, I hate this.
Maybe a little bit less time worrying about where Lou Holtz is, and a little more time focused on what down it is.
There was another weird part, and this is the part of the broadcast that I didn't really love.
Ryan Day so much.
This was the part of the broadcast I didn't really love. Was Joel Klatt is over interviewing Jim Knowles. And he's in the middle, and Jim Knowles is
forgettable. I get it.
Well, I wanted to say Coombs, but that was their secondary coach from years ago. But they were going and they were talking to Jim Knowles, and Ohio State's on defense. He's trying to call plays and do all this. And Joel Klatt has his microphone right in Knowles' face as he's trying to call a play. And he goes, run Ohio. And it gets broadcast live on TV. And I'm like, well, now every coach in America can go, okay, Connor Stallions, I see what you're doing.
Was that Jim Knowles or was that Connor Stallions in the hat?
I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, well, now every coach in the world is like, Ohio, let me focus really intensely on what their defense is going to run here. And I said that to somebody and they were like, oh, well, it was probably a decoy call. That is so stupid.
I think you'll be okay. I think you'll be okay.
It really doesn't make my blood boil, but it seems like it. But I just thought that was so.
Well, it's look at. I'll say this because again, we can only overanalyze the spring game so much. But I'll say this. I mean, we've seen with Ryan Day boneheaded calls, and we've seen the lights, and truly, we've seen the lights get too bright for him. And do you think we said this at the beginning of last year? After Michigan had come off the win in Columbus, we said, do you really think that Ryan's Day is going to be able to go up to Ann Arbor and get a win? And I don't remember, you kind of mumbled around it, but the answer was no, of course not. And we saw the pressure in that game where Sharon Moore, as an interim, outcoached Ryan Day, who inherited this Ferrari that he refuses to drive properly.
Well, and I think this is,
and it's and so now, and my point in that is one, make fun of Ryan, but two, now you're looking at 3 straight years. Mm-hmm. You spent $13 million of NIL money to beat Michigan.
If you're broke, just say
that's the reason. That's the reason. So you spent $13 million in NIL money. You've got the game at home. How much pressure is on Ryan Day right now? Because he's coaching for his job. I don't see a scenario in which he doesn't crack under that pressure. Well, and I really don't.
I mean, the last point I guess we can have with Ohio State before we move on. But to me, I'm curious what this year looks like for Ryan Day as far as his coaching, because to me, it's exactly what you said. Not saying he needs to win a natty, although I think that's the expectation, as it always is.
But I would say, especially with the amount they spent this offseason, it's natty or bust.
I don't know if it's natty or bust yet. I don't think the
fan base has a lot of patience.
I think it depends on what it looks like. To me, the bare minimum is you absolutely need to beat Michigan.
Oh, yeah. If you don't, you're gone.
You need to beat Michigan. You need to make the college football playoffs. And if you do lose, you need to be hosting that game, first off. You need to be hosting in the first round bye. If you end up losing that game, you need to at least look close. You can't have a Missouri. You can't have anything like that. That's the only way I see him saving his job. But I think the discussions would still happen.
Yeah, a loss to Michigan, that does not result in making the playoffs and winning the whole thing. But he lost to Michigan is the end of his tenure.
If he loses to Michigan and doesn't even make the playoffs,
even if you do, unless he comes home with a national championship trophy, a loss to Michigan is the end of Ryan Day. And I don't think that's a hot take.
No, I would probably agree with that. I think even to me,
you can't lose 4 years.
To me, and I know you're going to disagree as a Michigan fan, which is fine. To me, the talent gap is as good as it's been the past 3 years between the two.
That's what I heard in 21 and what I heard in 22.
And so I look at that and I go, the talent gap is there. You're at home. It's inexcusable at this point to lose that. But to go back a little bit, I'm curious if I feel like you have to be so stupid to be Ryan Day and not know that. And so, so I'm curious.
Well, that's why they're spending that much in the offseason. He's coaching for his job.
I'm curious if that makes him a little bit more aggressive or if that makes him even more conservative.
See, I think either way it gets into his head, though. And that's his issue. The lights get bright, he gets into his head, and he starts making dumb decisions.
I just think you've got a handful of games. I mean, you've got 3 big games on the schedule. You have at Oregon in October 12th, Penn State November 2nd. Those are both away games.
Yep. And then
I have a strong feeling that Penn State game is going to be a night game. Then you have Michigan at the end of the year.
Yep.
Those are the 3 games Ohio State has circled.
Yeah.
Oregon is going to be a college football playoff contender.
Absolutely.
At Penn State, no matter who they have on the field is tough. Even if Drew Aller throws 9 of 35.
Drew Aller.
They're still going to be tough. Man. And I think it's going to be in a night game, like I said, under the lights.
And Michigan is Michigan.
And Michigan, regardless of talent gap,
which
it's always close.
And we'll save this for in the season. I don't think that talent gap is nearly as wide as you think it is. But again, the game is the game.
Yeah.
At the end of it, that's why this whole podcast focuses on both these teams and why we talk so much about a stinking spring game and how that relates
and I love that we were like
to 9 months from now in November.
We're both like, oh, it's just a spring game. And then we're like, no, he looked great. How dare you?
I love it. I mean, and Michigan, just as a miniature preview, I mean, Michigan's got, if it's not the toughest schedule in college football, it's got to be one of them.
I wrote down some of these games.
We play Texas week 2, which is going to be a maze out. That is at noon because Fox is literally the worst.
When they announced that at the spring game, I was too busy getting pictures and all that. You told me on the car ride home that they announced
they said it was a maze out, and I'm going, it's a night game. This is going to be sweet. And they go, it's big noon kickoff. But you play Texas, you play USC in week 4, which again, what's USC going to look like?
Still it's USC. Good. Still going to be good.
Texas and USC in the first couple weeks of the season. You then have to go to Washington.
That's not going to be a good time. Even without Penix and both of their receivers.
You play Oregon. Obviously, you play Michigan State, which you should handle business, but a rivalry game's a rivalry game. And you play Ohio State. That is a horrible schedule. And then if you survive that somehow and back your way into the playoffs at 10-2, you then have to play playoff games. I mean, that's brutal. That's absolutely brutal.
It's the toughest schedule I remember you guys having. But
also week 2, you'll find out what this team's made of. If Michigan beats Texas in week 2,
I mean, because Texas to me, that's a college football playoff team. Them and Oregon are basically locks to me.
Oh man, I said at the beginning of the episode, I didn't know if I was ready for football season.
You are.
I'm ready.
It was in your blood the whole time.
I'm ready. What else you got to wrap up here?
We've got some wheel route. We normally do this at the beginning. We normally do this at the beginning.
Hit me with the wheel route. We'll close this out. By the way, while that wheel route is spinning, if you're not watching on YouTube and subscribing to the channel at Rival Pod there, and on Twitter and Instagram at Rival Pod, and also brand new rivalpod.com.
We're fancy.
Rivalpod.com. I know. Underclassmen to watch out for. Ooh.
Who you got?
Man. Oh, you want to go first on this one?
I absolutely can.
Is it Jeremiah Smith?
I have him, but it's obvious.
Yeah,
so I have a handful of guys that I felt like in the spring game really showcased themselves to me. Edric Houston, 5-star defensive end that came out this year. He's a freshman. He had, I want to say, 6 tackles. 3 of them were solo, and he had a sack on Julian Sane. Dude's going to be a beast down the line. He's not going to get much action this year, but by junior year, I mean, wouldn't surprise me to see him as a first rounder. Jeremiah Smith, obvious. That's just a given. If you've seen him at all, the dude looks like a senior already. Then I have the running back duo, Sam Williams-Dixon and James People. Even though they're freshmen, I think both of them performed really well. I'm a huge Sam Williams-Dixon fan. That's going to be my new Kate Stover. I've already decided.
Great.
And then the last person that I thought I was really trying to keep an eye out for was Aaron Noland. He was kind of highly, highly talked about once he recruited and committed to us. he performed well. I think he had 40-something yards in the air, but he also contributed like 40-something on the ground. You saw flashes of him.
It's a Jaden Davis type thing.
To me, outside of Will Howard, he looked the best at the spring game.
Which should also be a little bit concerning.
I don't know, though, because Ohio State, like, they had that with Braxton Miller. They had that with Terrell Pryor, where these freshmen came in, and Dwayne Haskins was another guy that came in their freshman year as a true freshman and were able to contribute. And so I look at that, and I'm like, I don't want to see him this year, but he showed me glimpses where I thought, I understand why this dude was a 5-star guy and why he's talked about. You could see it. Yeah. And he did have an interception towards the very, very end of the game. But overall, I was impressed with those guys. I thought, and a lot of those, I mean, were 5-star big name guys coming out, especially Jeremiah Smith, the number 1 player in the country. But I was hopeful with James People and Sam Williams-Dixon because they're 4-stars. And because I knew what our running back room depth-wise looked like, and they seemed to be a little bit more ahead of schedule. They're also in that same group where I'd love to not see them this year.
Right, yeah.
But next year, the year after, I wouldn't be surprised to see them getting starting roles, really being contributors.
On Michigan's side of things, I think Jair Hill at corner is going to be a name to watch out for again this year into next year. Adds a lot of depth for that team. Etta on the defense, big dude. He's going to be really good. And then kind of the obvious one for Michigan is going to be Samaj Morgan. I mean, I think it's easy to forget because he had such an immediate impact last year.
What year is he now?
He's a sophomore.
I was going to say, I thought last year
was a freshman. And again, the only mistake he really made last year was the
playing for Michigan.
Are you done?
I'm ready for football, man.
No, Samaj Morgan, outside of the fumble on the punt against Alabama, I mean, kid's got wheels.
Speed.
He's so fast. He's sure-handed. He's going to be really good. And Samaj is going to be, outside of bringing in again a transfer portal wide receiver, and even then, depending on who it is, Samaj is probably wide receiver 1. Although Colston Loveland, I think would say I'm kind of wide receiver 1, all right.
But also, just throw me the ball. It's fine.
But that kid as a sophomore has a lot riding on him, and so it'll be interesting to see how he handles that pressure. But I think he's ready for it. Across social. At RivalPod, rivalpod.com for everything you need. Be sure to subscribe, share with a friend. Man, we're just right for football now.
Ready.
The Rivalry is a production of River Radio Ministries. Want live updates from the show? Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at RivalPod. Visit our Patreon and consider becoming a patron for exclusive bonus content, merch, and more. And be sure to follow us wherever you're listening now for new episodes every Tuesday. And if you like what you're hearing, tell a friend so they can listen too.